It was a really old basket that had belonged to my great-grandmother. I was in the attic. My daughter had given me a real push into the attic. She said, "You need to go through that stuff, Mom." She had recently read a book by Marie Kondo about, getting rid of things. And I think there was another book, something about Swedish death cleaning. Yeah. So I was going through the things in the attic. There were a lot of things in the attic, things I hadn't looked at in years. Well, okay, maybe decades. Some of the things were mine, for sure. There were my old high school yearbooks. There were my elementary school report cards, the one from my first grade teacher that said, "Oh, Marilyn tends to be a little bit bossy, but she is learning to let others have a chance to talk." My husband really laughed when he heard that. Some of the things were my mother's, a needlepoint sampler and a stack of letters on thin blue paper, letters from servicemen who wrote to her during World War II. And then some of the things were my grandmother's. There was her postcard album. But this basket, I'm sure it belonged to my great-grandmother. I have vivid memories of her. She was still alive when I was a girl. And I loved visiting with her. She lived in a little house surrounded by a beautiful garden. It wasn't a particularly fancy house, but it did have some interesting touches. The fireplace was wonderful. At least it seemed so to me as a child. It was made out of stone, but the best part is there was one rock that was not mortared in. So you could remove that rock, and inside there was a special place for treasures, jewelry or gold, or I always thought that maybe there would be a map, a treasure map with an X marks the spot. Never found one of those, but I did always check. And then the mantelpiece on that fireplace, oh, it was gorgeous. It was wooden and it was carved by my great-grandfather. I never knew him. He was gone before I was born. He and my great-grandmother came to America from Germany, and it was said that in Germany he was a woodcutter. But when he came to America, he began to turn his talents into things that were smaller. He carved birds and little animals, and he carved that mantle in scenes that he remembered from Bavaria, in woods and cottages and little animals. It was beautiful. But my great-grandmother, now there was a woman. I've often thought that I got my bossing leadership skills from her. She was a force to be reckoned with, for sure. One time she took on the mayor and the whole city council. It was over some zoning thing. Somebody wanted to cut down a bunch of trees and make some housing, high-density housing. My great-grandmother was having none of it. She went to that city council meeting and she took them all on. She said every person in this community, every child, every adult needs some open space, some natural space to roam and to think and to dream and to have adventures. And well, the mayor said he was going to go ahead with his plans. And she looked at him with those steel blue eyes and she said, "Well, I guess you'll just have to do whatever you have to do then. I've faced worse." And there was something with the way she said it that everybody knew that was true. And the mayor backed down. Those trees are still there. She was an imposing woman. She was not tall, but she was compact and sturdy. She had white hair that was always pulled back in a bun, although little wisps always escaped and framed her face in white curls. And those steel blue eyes. She didn't dress in anything fancy. It was always what you would call a house dress. Different patterns, florals, stripes, plaid sometimes, but always red, always red. She said that whenever she wore something red, it made her feel brave and strong. Well, that's the basket. It had a lot of interesting things in it, and I remember. Don't you just love it? Oh, thank you, Angela.
Oh, Angela,
Oh,
you're
I
an
appreciate it.
angel.
Yes. I remember that she took that basket. We took it on picnics when I was a girl. And the picnics, they were interesting. It was always the same sort of thing. It was liverwurst sandwiches on brown bread, and pickles, fruit, and apple cake. Now, I wasn't much for the liverwurst sandwiches, but oh, it was worth eating a liverwurst sandwich to get a slice of that Apfelkuchen. It was absolutely the best. But there weren't any sandwiches or any pickles or, sadly, any apple cake in that basket now. But it wasn't empty. I pulled the things out of it. They brought back memories. The first thing was a piece of red cloth. I think we used to use it for a picnic blanket, but now that I looked at it, it looked a lot more like a cape of some sort. And there was a book of fairy tales, Grimm's fairy tales, in German. And there was a little carved bird. I'm sure my great-grandfather had carved that. And there was a hat pin, a long hat pin. You know, my great-grandmother, she didn't wear hats, not fancy hats anyway, maybe just a gardening hat, but she often had a hat pin stuck in the lapel of her dress. Once, when I was giving her a hug, the tip of that pin scratched my cheek just a little bit, and I said, "Great-grandma, why do you always have that hat pin?" And she said, "For defense."
Yeah.
I said, "Defense against what?" She said, "Well, you never know. You never know." So those were some of the things that were in the basket. The last thing, and I'd seen those things before, but the last thing that was in the basket, it was strange. I didn't remember seeing it, but it must have been special because she kept it in that basket. It was a little pouch, handmade, obviously. It was fur of some sort, gray fur. There wasn't anything in it, but it was in the basket. So I looked at all those things, the red cape, the hat pin, the little carved animal, and the book of Grimm's fairy tales, and that odd little fur pouch. And I thought, well, okay, I can get rid of a lot of things. Those high school yearbooks, they're gonna go. I won't miss those. But I'm definitely keeping the basket with all of those things from my great-grandmother. A smart, brave, imposing woman, always dressed in red.
Oh.